In June 2022, psychologists at the University of Chicago published a study on morbid curiosity, the human tendency to seek out dark, violent, and disturbing content. Participants were shown pairs of images, one disturbing, one neutral, and many, surprisingly, chose the disturbing one. This shows our attraction to unsettling stories isn't just fear or shock. The brain uses them to simulate danger, and it's always searching for something more intense. That's why today, on Top 2 Day, we're diving into 10 rare disturbing movies you've probably never seen before. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Let's start from number 10. Number 10, The Lodge, 2019. Just like in my previous video, we're starting with films that might already be known to hardcore horror and disturbing cinema fans. This is intentional, and as we move further down the list, the movies will become rarer and more extreme. The Lodge is a Canadian psychological horror film from directors Séverine Fiala and Veronica Franz, who previously shocked audiences with the disturbing masterpiece Goodnight Mommy. The plot is simple but tense. It follows Grace, a woman about to become the stepmother of two children, Aiden and Mia. She is left alone with them at a remote winter lodge, cut off from the outside world by a snowstorm. The children are cold and hostile toward her, resenting their father's new relationship. As the days go by, Grace's past trauma, which I won't spoil, begins to affect her. Food mysteriously disappears, personal belongings go missing, the generator stops working, and they seem completely cut off from the outside world. The film is mostly set in this isolated lodge, but thanks to strong performances, Riley Keough as Grace and Jaden Martell as Aiden, it remains compelling to watch. The Lodge isn't a perfect movie. The slow build-up can feel a bit long, and while the ending is both expected and shocking, it leaves some narrative questions unresolved. The father's character is underdeveloped, which makes it harder to fully understand Grace's motivations and the family dynamics. Overall, if you're a fan of slow-burn, atmospheric, psychological horror, especially with a chilling winter setting, The Lodge is worth your time, even if it doesn't fully satisfy hardcore disturbing movie fans. Number 9. The Woman, 2011. Next up is The Woman, a controversial and brutal horror film directed by Lucky McKee, based on the novel by Jack Ketchum. Let's be honest from the start. The Woman is definitely a B-level exploitation-style horror film. Brutal, shocking, with almost zero meaning and rough around the edges. But that's also part of its charm. It's bold, provocative, and leaves a strong impression despite its trashy elements. The plot is simple but disturbing. A successful lawyer and family man, Chris Cleek, captures a wild, feral woman, the last of a cannibalistic tribe, and brings her home, chaining her in the basement. What is a cannibal tribe doing in the forests of America? And how did she manage to shave her armpits? Sometimes, when watching B-level trash films, it's better not to ask too many questions. So, convinced that he can civilize her, he forces his wife and children to take part. But the situation quickly spirals out of control, revealing the darkest and most violent instincts of the human characters. Despite its rough edges, slow pacing at times, and obvious exploitation-style approach, the film leaves a lasting impression because of its audacity and shocking finale. Overall, if you're a fan of extreme, boundary-pushing horror, and don't mind the trashy B-level elements, The Woman is worth checking out. It's not for everyone, but its boldness and sheer audacity give it a unique place in disturbing cinema. Number 8. Frontière, 2007. Frontière is a hardcore French horror/survival film that many trash horror fans compare to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hostel, and other extreme horror movies. To be honest, I'm not sure if this film is truly rare, but I had never heard of it or seen it until I watched it just a few days ago. And I have to say, it was actually pretty impressive. I'm curious, have any of you seen it before? So, the plot follows a group of young thieves who, after a violent robbery in riot-torn Paris, try to escape with their stolen money and start a new life. On the run, they make a series of desperate decisions, sneaking through the countryside, avoiding police patrols, and trying to keep their fragile group together under extreme stress. Eventually, they stumble upon an isolated inn near the border, hoping for shelter and safety. But what they find is far worse than they could have imagined. The inn is run by a sadistic family of neo-Nazis and cannibals who torment their guests with brutal torture, grotesque violence, and absolute cruelty. The The characters are forced to confront unimaginable horrors, and one by one, their loyalty, courage, and sanity are tested to the extreme. The tension builds relentlessly as the group struggles to survive, making desperate choices that push them even deeper into danger, psychological and body terror. If you're looking for something similar to Hostel or Martyrs, this film might be for you. Yes, it doesn't quite reach the same level of brutality as Martyrs, but in my opinion, it's a step above Hostel. There are some genuinely intense and interesting scenes, and it's refreshing to see the characters actually fight back. I definitely recommend giving it a watch. Number 7. Bad Boy Bubby, 1993. Now we're getting into something truly unique. Directed by Rolf de Heer, this Australian cult film feels like a psychological experiment disguised as a dark comedy. And trust me, the first 30 minutes alone are enough to make many viewers turn it off. I was actually thinking about putting this one higher on the list, but since it kind of has a good ending, in its own strange way, I'll let it stay right here. The story follows Bubby, a 35-year-old man who has been locked inside a filthy apartment his entire life. His abusive and manipulative mother has convinced him that the outside world is toxic and deadly. He has never seen sunlight, never interacted with society, never experienced anything remotely normal. And when I say abusive, I mean something deeply disturbing, psychologically and physically twisted. His mother using him as a toy. I think you understand what I'm talking about. But then, through a series of chaotic events, Bubby finally leaves the apartment and enters the real world for the first time. And this is where the film becomes something completely different. What makes Bad Boy Bubby so powerful is that we experience the world through Bubby's perspective. He mimics everything he hears. He repeats phrases without understanding them. He copies behaviors, both kind and cruel, like a human parrot trying to survive in a confusing society. The world he enters isn't much healthier than the one he escaped. He encounters violence, religion, music, loneliness, random acts of kindness, and absurd situations that feel both darkly funny and painfully tragic. And that's the strange thing about this film. It's disturbing, yes, but it's also weirdly touching. Technically, the movie is also experimental. Different cinematographers were used for different segments of the story, giving each part of Bubby's journey a slightly different visual tone. It adds to the feeling that we're moving through completely new realities along with him. Be warned, the opening act is extremely hard to watch. But if you make it past that, Bad Boy Bubby becomes one of the most unusual and unforgettable experiences. Number 6. Dumplings, 2004. How far would you go for youth and beauty? Would you commit immoral acts to get what you want? And are you even sure that your desire for eternal youth and attractiveness is truly your own, or imposed on you by someone else? These questions, along with political and social undertones, are explored not only in substance, but also in Dumplings, long before many modern horror films dared to tackle such territory. The story follows Mrs. Lee, a wealthy former actress desperate to reclaim her youth and win back her unfaithful husband. She turns to May, a mysterious former gynecologist from mainland China, who prepares special dumplings with highly unusual ingredients. Eating them promises rejuvenation, but at a terrible moral cost. What exactly goes into the dumplings? That's part of the film's dark mystery, and it's better experienced without knowing in advance. On the surface, the story sounds simple. A woman obsessed with youth and desperate to keep her husband crosses every moral and ethical line to achieve her goal. So what makes dumplings truly disturbing? It's the context, the secret ingredient, the meticulous preparation, and a few shocking shots in the film. Trust me, it's safe to call this movie unsettling. But the film is also a sharp allegory. It reflects how gender, class, and capitalism function in Hong Kong and across the border with mainland China. The raw materials used for the dumplings are extracted from the mainland, manufactured into dumplings in Hong Kong, and consumed by the wealthy elite. Mrs. Lee, despite her wealth, is trapped as a trophy wife. Her beauty is her only asset, and it's fading with age. Meanwhile, May, the working woman, is self-sufficient and financially independent, yet extremely vulnerable. Behind the shocking premise lies a critique of social structures, how people are exploited, how appearances and youth are commodified, and how individuals navigate a harsh capitalist system. Dumplings is a disturbing, thought-provoking film that I highly recommend watching. Number 5. Gummo, 1997. In the world of disturbing cinema, there is one well-known yet rarely discussed director, Harmony Korine. His films often have no clear storyline, no explanations, no catharsis, and most importantly, no moral lesson. Gummo, released in 1997, is considered by many of his fans to be his best work. It's hard for me to judge whether that's true because I've never lived in America and I'm not deeply familiar with the social reality of poor white communities in rural areas. As a viewer, Gummo felt extremely unpleasant to me. Sometimes creepy, often disturbing, and deeply uncomfortable to watch. The scene where Solomon eats spaghetti in the bathtub is honestly one of the most hardcore moments I've ever seen, and there's nothing violent about it. I genuinely don't know how they managed to make something as simple as eating feel so disturbing. But for that scene alone, this movie absolutely deserves a place on this list. The film has almost no traditional plot structure. There is no beginning, no climax, and no ending. The story, if you can even call it that, takes place in a small American town called Xenia, Ohio, which was once devastated by a tornado. The town looks poor, decaying, and frozen in time, as if nothing has changed there for years. Two teenage boys drive around the neighborhood killing cats and selling the meat to a local restaurant. What makes it even more disturbing is that the cat shown in the film is real. They reportedly used the body of a cat that had already been found dead. We see uncomfortable slices of everyday life, filthy apartments, loneliness, social isolation, and people stuck in routines that feel empty and hopeless. These scenes work so well because Harmony Korine also cast real people, local oddballs, unusual personalities he found through friends and street connections. The idea behind the film was to capture a raw slice of time and place. Some moments feel almost documentary-like, and that was intentional. Korine was inspired by documentary filmmaking and even by photographs of real residents of Ohio. He wanted the camera to feel like it was simply observing life as it is, as if it accidentally wandered into these spaces. To sum up, I can say that this is a very heavy film, but in its own way. If you know more about this movie, do you think what it shows is exaggerated or realistic? Let me know in the comments. I'd genuinely be interested to hear your thoughts and learn more about it. Number 4. Ex-Drummer. Ex-Drummer is a Belgian film directed by Koen Mortier, and it is based on the novel of the same name by Herman Brusselmans. Many people call it the Belgian version of Requiem for a Dream. Personally, I don't completely agree with that. In Requiem for a Dream, you empathize with the characters until the very end, at least for the most part. Here, you don't really sympathize with anyone, and the ending even brings a strange kind of satisfaction. I 100% agree that Ex-Drummer has an amazing soundtrack with memorable songs, especially the final one, and incredible visual design. The film crew used many great cinematic techniques, and if you watch this movie even once, you will never forget it, even if you skip all the disturbing scenes. So, the story follows Dries, a moderately successful writer who is invited to join a punk band made up of 3 disabled musicians. He agrees, not because he cares about them, but because he thinks their misery will inspire his next novel. Each band member has their own disability. The first vocalist is deaf, regularly beats his wife, and neglects his parental duties. The guitarist is completely dependent on his mother. It's a kind of twisted disability of its own. The main vocalist lisped, which isn't exactly a disability, but he's a cruel abuser who spent time in prison for assault and seems to specialize in attacking others. Into this group of unstable, depraved, and cruel people comes, at first glance, the seemingly normal Dries. They call their band the Feminists and are preparing together for upcoming concerts. As Dries gets to know his new bandmates, he quickly realizes what they really are. Instead of helping them, he starts plotting his own kind of revenge, giving each of them exactly what he believes they deserve. I won't spoil the rest of the plot, but I can say there are a couple of shocking moments in the film, so be prepared. The movie is full of sex and drugs. The film also has its own cinematic style: bold camera work, distorted perspectives, aggressive editing. Considering the budget, the director and cinematographer did an incredible job creating something visually striking and intense. The soundtrack is amazing too, especially the final scene with that song. It's just incredible. And the ending even delivers a certain kind of moral. Ex-Drummer isn't an emotional tragedy like Requiem. It's uglier, meaner, more cynical and dirtier. I definitely recommend watching it at least once. Number 3. Visitor Q, 2001. Remember, You can't just skip a Takashi Miike film when making any kind of top disturbing movies list. This veteran of extreme cinema can be a real eye-opener for newcomers to the genre, or it might just become their ultimate nightmare. We've already talked about other Miike classics like Imprint or Audition, but today I decided to focus on Visitor Q. Between Ichi the Killer and Visitor Q, I chose today's pick because it's much more niche and rare, offering an extremely unique, disturbing, and twisted experience compared to the more well-known Ichi the Killer. I should warn you right away, the themes in this film are extremely shocking, the kind you would expect from films on adult sites. The movie contains a huge number of gross, grotesque, and taboo scenes I don't even want to describe in detail. Let's just say the boundaries of what's allowed on screen are clearly pushed. Takashi Miike deliberately presents uncomfortable, outrageous moments, often seasoned with his signature black humor, to shock, disturb, and provoke the audience. Visitor Q follows a deeply dysfunctional Japanese family living in a small apartment. The father is abusive, the mother is sexually promiscuous and emotionally detached, and the teenage son is withdrawn, depressed, and self-harming. The family's life is a cycle of violence and neglect behavior, completely disconnected from any sense of normalcy. One day, a mysterious man calling himself Visitor Q appears at their door. At first, he seems calm and ordinary, but his presence gradually disrupts the family's dysfunctional routines. Instead of condemning them, he provokes situations that force each family member to confront their darkest behaviors. By the end, the family reaches a strange, darkly comic form of reconciliation. This is a very hard-to-watch movie, full of sexualized and violently disturbing scenes, often grotesque and shocking. Like any work by Takashi Miike, the film has many horrifying moments mixed with dark humor, and the hardest part is realizing that you actually laughed at something truly disgusting or horrifying. If you haven't watched Takashi Miike's films before, it's probably better to start with Ichi the Killer, because in my opinion, this movie is even more disgusting. Number 2. The Strange Thing About the Johnsons, 2011. So at number 2, we don't have a full-length film, and maybe it's somewhat known to some of you, but I placed it here for 3 reasons. First reason, I hadn't seen it before and actually discovered it thanks to you, dear viewers. I've watched a huge number of disturbing movies, but I had never seen this one. Second reason, you can watch it right on YouTube, and thanks to its short format, it won't take much of your time. And the third reason, and the main one, this short film manages to put even the most seasoned viewer into a state of shock. Without a single scene of physical violence, jump scares, or gore, it still manages to be deeply disturbing. Yes, I understand that compared to the other movies we've already talked about, this one is available on YouTube, and maybe I should have placed it higher in the ranking. But I'll leave it here because it's easy to find, and it can serve as a starting point for someone who wants to explore disturbing cinema. The story revolves around a seemingly normal family, the Johnsons. On the surface, everything looks ordinary. A father, a mother, and a son. The film starts with a scene where the father is talking with his son about adult topics. Unfortunately, to avoid spoilers, I can't say more. Just trust me, it's worth your time, and a minute or two in, you'll see exactly why. Instead of revealing more plot, let me tell you a bit about the filmmaker. It's Ari Aster, whose work you probably know from Hereditary and Midsummer. The strange thing about the Johnsons was his thesis film. Aster has said that he deliberately wanted to make the most provocative and uncomfortable film he could. Even before filming began, he was discussing taboo themes with friends, trying to come up with something that would genuinely disturb people. The film was made on a very small budget, reportedly around $5,000 to $7,000. It was shot in a real house with a minimal crew and tight schedule. Years later, the short went viral online, introducing a whole new audience to Aster's early work. To sum it up, yes, The Strange Thing About the Johnsons isn't a full-length movie, but a short film. Yes, it's not as physically brutal and doesn't contain the graphic horror of the other films on this list. But as a debut project made on a tiny budget, it's an outstanding piece of work that, in just 30 minutes, can introduce an unprepared viewer to the world of disturbing cinema. For everyone who's looking for something more rarer and niche, I've prepared the #1 spot. But before we move to the first place, I almost forgot about the bonus movies. Today's bonuses are very weird because I actually don't recommend watching them to anyone. Grotesque, 2009. Grotesque is a Japanese horror film directed by Koji Shiraishi, infamous in the horror community for being relentlessly brutal and extreme. Let me be clear, this is pure gore for the sake of gore. Don't look for any deeper context or hidden meaning. The setup in this film is symbolic. A young couple, Kei and Kazuko, are kidnapped by a sadistic man after a seemingly random encounter. What follows is an unrelenting series of tortures, ranging from psychological torment to grotesque physical mutilation. I don't see the point in describing the sexual or physical abuse in detail. Just know that it's extremely brutal, both morally and visually. I don't recommend this movie to anyone, only if you are looking for extreme scenes. Sweet Movie, 1974. Sweet Movie, directed by Dusan Makaveyev, could have been one of the most scandalous films in the world if it had reached mainstream audiences, which, in my opinion, luckily never happened. The film barely has a linear narrative. It consists of wildly provocative scenes, from a virginity contest to dance sequences and minimal clothing performed in front of children. Honestly, I have no idea how this film was ever allowed anywhere, even back in the 70s. Like the previous film on this list, I can't really recommend it for viewing. Sorry for such a weird bonus entry. Yet, these films are rare and extremely niche, so watch at your own risk. 964 Pinocchio, 1991. The last film for today is a Japanese experimental art house horror directed by Shozen Fukui. The film is often compared to Tetsuo, the Iron Man. Fukui was actively involved in the creation of that cult classic, and 964 Pinocchio can almost be seen as a kind of spiritual predecessor or ideological blueprint for it. I'd also add that some scenes feel like subtle nods to the well-known Possession. The film follows 964 Pinocchio, a memory-wiped cyborg sex slave who has been discarded by his owners after failing to maintain an erection. Left wandering in a near catatonic state, he is discovered by Himiko, a homeless woman, who is also memory-wiped. Together, they attempt to uncover the truth behind their condition and take revenge on Pinocchio's former owners. As you can hear, that is Oscar-worthy scenario. It fully embraces trash aesthetics and dark, almost absurd humor. Strange to say, but for me, this one is the strongest of the bonus picks. Number 1. Ebola Syndrome, 1996. Ebola Syndrome is a 1996 Category 3 horror film directed by Herman Yao and starring the absolutely unhinged Anthony Wong. Honestly, this film isn't necessarily better than the bonus picks, and it's the first time I've ever put a non-documentary at number 1. But this movie is so brutal, chaotic, and rarely talked about that I couldn't leave it off the list. The story follows Kai, a completely morally bankrupt human being, selfish, violent, and utterly disgusting. After his boss catches him in bed with his wife, Kai goes on a brutal killing spree and decides to flee to South Africa. Being unable to control his dark desires and rotten nature, he gets involved with a woman from a local tribe, and, as you probably guessed, not by mutual consent, who happens to be infected with the Ebola virus. Instead of dying, Kai becomes a super carrier, 1 in 12 million or something like that, and brings the virus back with him to Hong Kong. I won't spoil the rest, but trust me, the film is packed with horrific, disgusting, and violent scenes. Don't expect a serious pandemic thriller. This film doesn't care about realism. It cares only about shock, and sometimes a little about comedy, if we can say that. Anthony Wong's performance is absolutely deranged. His character is selfish, violent, racist, misogynistic, basically every red flag you can imagine rolled into one human being. This movie is hard to find, but it is available online. If you're looking for something that will genuinely shock you, I think this film will definitely do the job. So that's it for today's list. What do you think about these movies? Have you seen all of them or none at all? Do you know more crazy, disturbing films that hardly anyone has heard of? Share your list or your favorites in the comments below. If you enjoyed this list, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.